Americans throw away enough food every year to fill 730 football stadiums.
40% of all food is wasted in this country, yet 1 in 7 people go to bed hungry every night. There's parties going on at every hotel.
This is the iconic Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach. There are 1,600 rooms here, and there have been parties leading up to the weekend all week. It's going to be slam-packed with people and food.
Bowen rescues food all across South Florida. She's partnered with several companies to help rescue thousands of pounds of food following the Super Bowl and related events.
Hundreds of South Florida families will eat well thanks to the efforts of volunteers who rescued thousands of pounds of untouched restaurant-quality food left over from the Super Bowl.
We have a team member that actually works on all of our events, all of our breakdowns, sorting it all so that when the food goes out, it's easy for the mission operators to work with.
This day, it's the Lotus House, where 450 residents, many of them children, are living.
There is a law from 1996 called the Bill Emerson Food Donation Good Samaritan Law that allows for any food donated in good faith to be free of liability to the donor.
Armed with the goods, Ellen's off to just one of approximately 10 drops per week.
One of this week's parties will end up as 1,500 meals at Rescue Mission.
We do everything based on the app. The donor requests the pickup. We match it with a social service agency, and then volunteers actually go on the app and then claim the pickup and the drop-off.
The fact that you're feeding people, the fact that you're giving people an opportunity, the hope that it gives people, that we're not feeding people food, we're feeding them hope.
What happens to decomposing food in landfills is it produces more methane gas than auto emissions do. So in addition to reducing food waste, feeding the hungry, we're also working to reverse climate change.
There's a lot of people that go hungry, and I just think the look of gratitude is the most rewarding thing that I can see on somebody's face when they come into our center to eat a meal.
We're here to feed people and not landfills.
All right, everybody, good morning. Final session block of the Refed Summit. Can I get a woo? We made it. It's been a great 3 days. That's how long I've been here. Maybe that's how long you've been here as well. For those of you who don't know me, hello, I'm Nia D'Amelio. I'm the communications manager at Refed. And one of my favorite parts of my job is that I get to manage all of the comms for the U.S. Food Waste Pact, which we're going to hear a little bit about today. So I've had the privilege of working with a lot of these wonderful people on this really important issue. They are the smartest people in the world. Brag. So I hope that you really enjoy the session. It's going to be really engaging, and we're definitely going to have time to answer questions. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to our wonderful moderator, Christy Cook.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Awesome. All right, we're going to try to bring the energy today because it's the last day. Come on. All right, so I'm Christy. I work for Investor Strategies, and by work for, I guess it's me. So I work for myself. And I've had the great opportunity to work in the corporate sustainability world for about 20 years, and now I get to do this fun stuff. So what I would say is just personally, I do a lot of work with grocers, food service, hospitality, working on a lot of areas, but food waste prevention and all of the ways there. So also, if you're looking for a good podcast, Green Champions, check it out. So the reason I share that is what we do is we talk about how do you make sustainability accessible? How do you ensure that everyone can take climate action? And that's what we're talking about today, and we're bringing that practical lens to what we're talking about today. So, amazing panel that we have. We'll each share some information with you. Make sure you get that. And I keep dropping things. So I am going to put this slide. What you're going to get from us today is you get our commitment that you're going to learn something today. You're going to be able to leave this session and have at least one action that you can take and you know what it's supposed to do for you and you can do it. That's what we assure you of, and you're gonna have this whole group that gives you a lot of ideas. So with that said, why in the heck do we need to think about waste at events? And Alex, I will tell you that our panel up here, the slides aren't moving, so that would be cool, but if not, don't stress on it. Because we are a flexible group, because working in events, you have to be. And so, right on, Aaron. So 2 million business meetings, conferences a year, 251 million attendees. That is a lot of people that come in and out for an event like this one. And it's hard to control all the parameters because, hey, you know what? If this were yesterday, we'd have more people in this room, but some people have to get back. They've got obligations. So that impacts how you schedule and arrange for your food to happen. So there's a lot of things that happen with the tight turnarounds. You want things to be abundant. It's just a unique opportunity to make sure of how things happen. And waste is gonna happen if you don't prepare for it, if you don't make decisions in advance. And that's a lot about what we'll talk about today. Waste happens across in many different ways. It can happen, obviously, for overproduction, what we don't sell. It can happen when people just don't eat what we expect them to eat. And so what we wanna do is try to open our eyes, make this more preventable and recoverable wherever we can. And that's our goal with this. So what I like about this, thinking about the event journey, it is a journey and it is different if you are a planner versus a venue. So when you're thinking about a planner, you might be thinking about, I need to discover where to host this event. Is it Charlotte? Is it Seattle? Is it Baltimore? Where is it? And what is that location? And what infrastructure do they have? So then you start to think about, how do I design and deliver this event to have exceptional experiences, but I need to make sure I'm debriefing with my venue afterwards. Well, listen, that's great, but you also have this venue on a completely different journey. They too have to design with the planner what kind of event, what kind of exceptional experience do we want our folks to have here? And then they have to I'm looking at my cheat sheet here, but they have to order the food, they have to prep the food, they have to think about how are people going to consume the food and what do we want that to look like? And obviously, we want to make sure that we are coordinating with planners after as well to debrief. What went well? What didn't? What can we do better next time? And the point of this is trying to make these connections between all of these people. When we start thinking about a planner, there might be multiple people there, but we think about a venue, you've got setup, AV, you then also have a million different people with culinary, catering, sales, stewarding, all these people, everyone intentioned well to make a great event, but every single person is an opportunity for something kind of to go a little wrong, to be honest, if we don't plan and make decisions. So our point is that we need to require planners and venues working together so we can actually get what we need to do to reduce food waste before the event happens, how to manage it during the event, and then post-event. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today. A little bit about low-waste events. Why low-waste events? A study by Deloitte and WWF found that planners want to do this. We know this. We also know that venues don't want to waste food. We just don't want to do that, and also it's a cost option that we don't want to do that. So what we've done is create a toolkit that is low-waste events. So a lot of what we're talking about today has to do with findings that we found. Some of the folks in here will share so many different viewpoints of what they have as well, but what we just want to make sure that you know is that, again, there's resources, there's information that you can take away from this, but it's based on our real-world experiences, each of us up here. And now I get to share this with others on the stage. And we might be a comedy of errors because it's the last day. I keep dropping things, but I have confidence in this lady right here. So she is going to take us for the win.
Thank you, Christy. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. So I'm Caroline Beloga. I'm the Sustainability Manager with LifeWorks Restaurant Group. LifeWorks Restaurant Group is a workplace dining division of Aramark. And Aramark is a large food service provider, and we work across a variety of contexts, including healthcare, colleges and universities, sports and entertainment, destinations. And so we really, when we're approaching food waste, we have to really kind of approach it in mind with all these variables in terms of context. So our overall food waste strategy is aligned with the EPA's wasted food scale, so you saw that on the main stage this morning. So it's really important to first start with prevention. So I will be speaking a lot more about what we're doing to address prevention in events. And from there, we then, if we have any surplus food, are donating it, upcycling, repurposing, and then eventually going to compost. And then you can go to the next slide. So over the last year, we've really started to dig more into events. We really have it locked down in our traditional operations in terms of food waste measurement, and we're now taking those practices, measurement, and this 5 Ps principles for food production, and taking what's worked in those more traditional contexts, and now applying it to events. So with the 5 Ps, we first start with, this is kind of walking you through the process. It applies for both traditional operations and now as we look into events. So starting with planning, making sure that the menu design and the structure of the menu makes sense for the audience demographics and the number of attendees. And then going into products, so making sure that we're purchasing the right amount of ingredients for what we're serving, managing our inventory well, using FIFO, first in, first out, and then going into production. So scaling the recipes appropriately for the number of people at the event, and then going into portioning, so when we're actually serving the food in the vessels for the buffet or whatever event it is, and making sure we're using the right size of vessels, it's appropriate. And then lastly, into post-production. So this is where we're measuring food waste and then going back through this whole process in our future events and refining every time. And so this is not rocket science, but food waste prevention, as you can see through the diagram, it really needs to be embedded through conversations throughout every single process and every step, and making sure that we're not just considering it once the food waste has been generated. And so then our role in the food wasted ecosystem. So we are kind of, we're the food service hospitality providers. We really are at the center. We're coordinating efforts across venues, planners, food recovery partners, and making sure that prevention and diversion are happening.
Yes, I like the snaps. Snaps.
Okay. Oh, good. Everyone can hear me. My name is Ellen Bowen. I am the South Florida Site Director for Food Rescue US, which is why I'm in a sleeveless top. And why my background is water. So there you go. Starting off quickly, Food Rescue US, South Florida at a glance. We connect surplus food to the community partners. We use app technology to record every donation, match it with a local receiving agency, and then we have a network of volunteers that actually claim it on the app. So we coordinate all those pieces. The video that some of you saw when you first came in actually dates back to 2020, to the Super Bowl in Miami. I had been working with Food Rescue for a little over a year. We were doing 10 rescues a week. We now do over 100 a week. And what was interesting about that was we rescued at the Super Bowl. And it was the first time that a Super Bowl had ever been rescued to the degree we did. We rescued over 60,000 pounds of food. And this was a mixture of prepared food that never left the kitchen. When you're hosting a luxury event, whether it's sports or Formula One, which I will talk about also, and any concerts, there is always surplus because you can't tell someone who maybe paid $25,000 for their ticket that you're out of their filet mignon. So what happened is it does get saved, it's prepped, it's left in the walk-in, we rescued that. That along with probably 20 to 50 refrigerated trailers that were filled to the brim with frozen meat, bread, produce, everything else. So prior to our doing that at the Super Bowl, all of that had gone to the garbage. So it really opened up a door to a whole new way of rescuing food. And we've really grabbed it down in South Florida. We just 2 weeks ago finished our 5th year rescuing at Formula One, which is that crazy Grand Prix race. We don't go to it. we just show up the next day. But we rescued over 75,000 pounds of food from that. And we've rescued at the baseball Marlins, the Florida Panthers, marathons, anything you can think of where there might be surplus food. And we don't look at it as wasted food. We don't look at it as food waste. We look at it as wasted food. I refer to it as surplus and excess more than I ever do food waste. And I just want to encourage all of you that either work with events or are attending events to really look at this has become a new way to rescue food. 10 years ago, this didn't exist. Now places like Aramark and Compass and Sodexo, they have put into their model reduction of food waste. So for lack of a better word, it's low-hanging fruit. And you can really go in and meet with the correct people, find out who the food service organization is, and really pitch being able to rescue and divert that food. Oh, my role in the food waste ecosystem. Obviously, it's recovery and it's diversion. But we work very closely with event planners. We now have corporate groups that are planning a conference at a big hotel that are coming to us and saying we want to incorporate, food recovery as part of our event. And also, obviously, consumers, ask the question, where's the food going? What's happening to the surplus? So we like to feel that we're building a good coordination layer between all of those places to really eradicate what is turning out to be a huge, huge amount of food that can go to waste. Just one last statistic I just want to throw in. I read somewhere that every NFL football game produces more than 80,000 pounds of waste. Every football game. So that just shows you what's out there that we can capture and then divert to people who need it. So thank you. Snap, snap. I can't do it.
Liz, amazing intersection of opportunity where you sit in this.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Liz Ficus, and I work for Seattle Public Utilities, which is the department in the city of Seattle. My work focuses on food waste prevention with Seattle businesses, supporting them to embed these practices into their work every day, but also acknowledging that surplus will always happen. And so the other chunk of work I do is to help support food rescue standardization and efficiencies across the system from the donor to the recipient organizations. So in this slide, this is really just to give an example of so many people don't know what the public sector role is. It's great. It's so great on this panel to hear from different perspectives, but I have plenty of people saying, what does the city do in this? My role in both the Food Waste Collaborative Partnership, which is about prevention, and in food rescue, is a lot around coordination and sharing the learnings across partners, constantly building partnerships. So for this panel, talking about large events, I play the role really of coordination and helping we talk about planners, venues, the food vendors, the hunger relief organizations, all get on the same page with really effective communication tools. And for them to understand what are each of their expectations. Because when you get into a large event, you're focused on carrying off the event and not so much about food waste as your focal point. We're obviously collecting a lot of data and evaluating as we go, developing the tools so that it's everything from standardizing equipment to simply informing the food vendors of when they're going to donate. And then we're really bringing in the expertise of the other partners. SBU doesn't execute on the recovery or figure out the transportation. We're just helping the food rescue partners come in and offer their expertise. So this is why it matters. Even in a city where composting and recycling at large events is required and has been so since 2015, you can see huge amounts of garbage, a lot of it single-use packaging and food waste. poor sorting, obviously. It leads to litter because it can't all fit into those dumpsters. And what we're seeing at Seattle Center, which is a 74-acre campus for events owned by the city, it results in 22 tons of waste, equivalent to 4 orca whales, just to get a visual of that. So that's why this all matters. As a city employee, I'm in the public sector, and in that space, convening, and it's finding food waste prevention solutions to food rescue opportunities, and obviously effective diversion without contamination. And a key part of that is simply making food waste visible. It's so invisible until you see photos, right, of the after, and helping everyone along that supply chain of an event know that it's there before it happens, and building the coordination for it to happen well.
Oh, sorry, Liz. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Schaefer. I'm a sustainability senior consultant at Deloitte, but I sit internally. So Deloitte is known for being this really large client services firm, but we do have folks that sort of help Deloitte also become more sustainable as an organization. I'm one of those folks. Also, just to add some humor, don't get your hair cut drastically before you get a professional headshot done. I did. I learned from that. Okay. So Deloitte at a glance. I mentioned this, but Deloitte is a very large professional services organization. We serve clients across consulting, audit and assurance, tax, advisory services. But this also means that we do participate and convene a lot of events, conferences, meetings every single year across communities, different industries. And that's sort of where I come in and where my role at Deloitte fits into this ecosystem. I lead what we call our everyday sustainability strategy at Deloitte, Deloitte US, and I kind of sit at the intersection of employee engagement related to sustainability and our zero waste goals and circularity strategy. So one of our goals is to achieve zero waste status at all of our major meetings and events in the US with more than 1,000 attendees. So that's quite a few events every year. And we've been piloting and sort of seeking to achieve zero waste status for the past couple of years, and we achieved this goal in 2025. So now we're kind of in the maintenance phase, which is wonderful. And we define zero waste as a 90% diversion of all non-hazardous waste from the landfill. And food waste is a very big component at major meetings and events. So when we're thinking about the scope of the problem, we're really thinking how event expectations on the planner side, but also on the venue side, can really shape service styles and quantities. So my role is kind of unique. I'm not exactly a planner. I work with our meeting planners at Deloitte to try to embed these zero waste practices into what they're thinking about from a banquet event order perspective, BEOs, if you're familiar with that term. That's a really critical, I'll talk more about that, but critical place where we can go in early and start discussing prevention. I heard that term thrown a lot, but I think that's really key, is really thinking about on the front end, what can we do from a food waste prevention strategy, which really relies, again, on that planner-venue relationship to try to reduce potential amounts of wasted food before we even go to the event. And again, just that early conversation, starting to understand what the layout of each venue is, that's been very important for me, because you're right, you might have a venue in Vegas that has very different practices than a venue in San Diego or something like that, right? So that's where those conversations and just understanding the lay of the land is really important. So again, I'm not necessarily a meeting planner. I do advise our meeting planners, so I think I'm apt to be in this conversation as well. And we also touch venues. Sometimes Deloitte is a host of certain events in our offices, in our spaces. We touch this prevention piece. And then we really are thinking about the back end of this and recovery and diversion and making sure we have a full understanding of the food and waste ecosystem at our different events. And so, just my key contribution is just setting the tone early, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we've done to kind of aid our planners and venues that we work with in that process.
That is perfect, and thank you for that planner-ish perspective. But seriously, with that's amazing. So we're going to move into some Q&A times here, and there's going to be opportunity for Q&A at the end as well for you to have a couple of things. We're going to stay with Emma and talk a little bit about, when you have these planners, what is the opportunity from your perspective how you can influence waste reduction in the planning of the event? What do you do? What do you
Totally.
advise on?
Yeah, I think for me, it was learning the language of event planning from the planner perspective, which I mentioned this term, but getting involved in the BEO planning process, which intersects all of these different groups with the venue and the planner, and starting to decide, like what attrition rates we can factor in when thinking about how much food guests are going to eat or how many guests are even going to be attending in the first place. And sort of from there, you can start to think about what vessels you want your food served in and all of this stuff. And I think it's an iterative process. We've gone back and forth many times in some of these big major events where we're thinking about, okay, on this day, maybe we want a buffet style lunch, but if it's a buffet, what potentially could be wasted the most? And I think from some of the work that we did with Refed and with WWF and this food waste pilot that Christy mentioned really helped us understand from the start at one of our big events that we have in Orlando, what are common practices that the hotel just employs in those BEOs and standard practices? And then where could we potentially reduce on the front end and have that conversation as a planner to influence the decision? Because I think there's a huge concern of wanting to seem like you have abundant food and enough food, but understanding that maybe people won't eat 1.5 bread rolls per person at every buffet. And that was a stat. We were able to actually cut bread waste and dressing waste by 50% at that event, just from this pre-planning effort in the BEO process. So yeah, I think understanding the lay of the land, getting into the BEOs, understanding what's actually being served, what the standard processes are, and then how you could potentially amend that. And we also saw that actually at the event and being able to say, like maybe that's not the right vessel size for that dressing, or maybe having 2 vessels on the table is too much. Like it was a very cool process to go through together to be able to understand what we had done on the front end that was effective, but also during and throughout the event, what we could do to sort of amend, adjust, and then also just having a conversation after realizing what we had done successfully and where there was still room for improvement. I think that's a huge part of being a planner at these events is understanding that that's kind of your role in the ecosystem is what can you do on the front end and starting those conversations early.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to know, 1.5 for a roll, everybody eats a roll and a half. Kind of weird, right? But you're in food service, that's how you think about it when you're planning events. It's actually 0.8 is what we learned. So yeah. Everybody eats 0.8. So a little trivia fact, it'll be on a quiz later.
0.8.
Liz is in a unique position with how the ecosystem of where you operate and all the players within it, but you're working on this. What are the gaps that you're seeing in this? Where are your challenges at right now?
Yeah, and I have to say, I think all of us could add to this conversation who've been in food rescue and events. Seattle just started this last year, so we're the early learners, or in that learning stage. What I saw over and over is everyone's busy on pulling off the event, and they don't know how much food waste is happening at each point in that chain. So a key gap is there's a lack of visibility, and so to the extent that you can make that visible at each step with photographs, with any sort of data, that's going to be hugely impactful, because otherwise people just don't want to take action. They're focused on what they're really supposed to do. They need to understand their role. Like, what is their specific role in that food waste challenge? But the other part is you can't just do a one-off. Like, our point of doing this pilot was to learn so that we could replicate like crazy, right? And adapt it. So you need to identify what are the points along this event that can be standardized. And that helps the event the next year with those same food vendors, those same planners, do it all over again and understand it and be much more efficient about their operations. So like, this picture here is less about what we had, it was less about food rescue, but you can see this was all about standardizing, making sure that the event attendees knew where the garbage went, the recycling, the food waste compost, even the reusable dishes. So how can that be done with signage, equipment, communication tools for food rescue as well? so that even the public comes to know surplus food is going to go to people who need that food, and all the food vendors and everyone involved know that is part of the operations, part of the expectations.
Fantastic. Ellen, we're going to jump back to you, and you recover more than just at events. But what is different about events? Why is it different?
Well, I think when you're dealing with events, there is the preparation, there is the prevention, but it's also a little bit of a sales pitch. You really need to find out who's the decision maker where you want to rescue. And you really need to go in with a proposal of what you're going to be able to do. A lot of the companies that we've worked with, they like to hear about the reduction of waste management costs. They like to hear about the tax benefits from making a donation. We have found chef teams really like to know that the food that they're prepping, that they're very proud of, that is going to people that need it, especially in the community. So it does become sort of a 3-tier sales pitch. And certainly working with the large venues, you know, as you said, they're more interested in pulling off Formula One or Super Bowl or whatever event they're doing. But if you work with them ahead of time, and we actually did a case study at Food Rescue US on the Formula One, because we've now just finished our 5th year, that I could certainly share with anyone if they want to contact me, that really walks you through the opportunity, walks you through what you need to do in terms of planning it, and then how you really pitch it. And I just found that it was much easier to do than ever before. I mean, this was day 1 from Formula One, 24 pallets from the Sodexo, which was the food service kitchen. We had 4 box trucks that were coming from various shelters and soup kitchens that we work with, 4 receiving agencies, prepared food that never left the kitchen, that was packed safely in disposable pans, labeled, and refrigerated. Day 2, I mean, it went crazy. We had 50 pallets from the main caterer that handled all of the different activations, because there's a lot of celebrity activations at these kinds of events, plus 15 more pallets, 7 trucks, and we had an organization come with an 18-wheeler, and 7 more receiving agencies. So it really becomes very large scale and very community-minded. And I find our receiving agencies and even the people working in the kitchens, the chefs, the forklift drivers, I mean, I never knew what a pallet was. Now I do. All of these pieces that come together really make a difference in trying to get these rescues done on a large scale.
Caroline, let's jump back to a little bit your 5 Ps, food service a little bit, but tell us what kind of data are you trying to look at? What data are you looking at that's helping your decision process that feed into the 5 Ps?
Yeah, so this has really been, it was, as Liz mentioned, really a blind spot for a lot of our locations. And so it was undeniable that a lot of food waste was happening at events. Everyone can agree on that, the chefs, the guests, our clients. And so it really became, how are we gonna create really hard data around this? And so this came out of the low waste events pilot that happened about a year ago. We had the opportunity to work with the US Food Waste Pact and start to measure food from events. So the process, it was, I think, August of 2025, and we had a multi-day event, and we had about 150 or so attendees, and we measured all of the food going into the event and then measured it after the event, and then we also measured plate waste, and Christy was there for it, so she can attest to it. It was a messy day. And we had to, and what went into that effort is we had to reserve a separate conference room. We got lucky and had a lot of the US Food Waste Pact and had a lot of support to be able to measure that waste. And from that, we had a lot of great photos and data around what occurred at that event, what was left over. And across all of the pilots with the low waste events, 42% of prepared food went uneaten. So, and that's that's a crazy statistic. That's not something that we want to continue. So now it's like, okay, what do we do about this? And it was great to have that data for one event, but now it's like, okay, we can't make a decision based off of just one event. So now it became, how are we going to regularly measure the waste left over from events on a regular basis? So similar to what we're doing in our back of house kitchens, where we're measuring food waste in our kitchens and in our cafes. And so how can we bring that best practice into event space to drive prevention? And so we leaned on our long-term partner, LeadPath, and we went to them to say, hey, how can we start to measure this waste? And it started with a briefcase and a tablet that it was a prototype that our teams tested. And we quickly realized we need something that's more mobile, something that's less manual, something that people can do in seconds. And so from there, we're now testing the latest prototype, the Snap AI, and we have been able to get these photos. So this is just one event, and you can clearly tell the story of what was left over, what they didn't eat at this event, and really good data. And so basically how it works is just taking photos of all of the menu items before the event is started and then after the event, and then using AI models, LeanPath is able to measure the waste from the event and categorize the waste. And so our teams don't have to do anything manual except snapping a photo, which everyone can do. And yeah, so that's been really, really great to be able to get this data back from an event level and then be able to see trends over time. And so this then leads to insights like, hey, we have tons of vessels. This is just a small sampling of all the vessels we can choose from. And so our teams were kind of on autopilot, just filling the vessels. And so now it's like we have this hard data and we know a consumption rate. And so that's a really key metric to understand how much are people actually eating at the event. And so maybe we don't need to necessarily fill the bowl to the brim. Maybe we can fill it halfway. And so it's really important to have this data on events, but then also to be able to have the time for our teams to be able to take that extra step, understand who they're serving, how many people they're serving, and how much is needed. And really exciting news that the LeanPath Snap AI is now on the marketplace, so that's really, really exciting. Yeah.
Good. So yeah, like we wanted you to make sure you took away some actions. We've been showing you actions impact throughout this. We have more to go. We have one more set of questions that we want to hit, but we want to make sure that we have questions for you guys. We're running a little late on time because it's the last day. It's a party day. And so we're going to speed it up a little bit. But Ellen, we've got to talk back with you here and going back to F1 events and such. But tell us a little bit about, from your point of view in the surplus space, what can be decided before the event that will help you not have 50 pallets, at the end of day 2?
Well, I think obviously the planning up front, there is going to be excess and surplus, but I think being able to identify where the surplus is going to be and identify it ahead of time so that when we come in, because we come in the next day, it's already staged for us in many cases. The surplus food that never left the kitchen is palletized, another word I learned. And it makes it that much easier for us to really be able to recover it, get it out. I mean, we usually start at 10 a.m. The day after the event with the trucks coming through. So I think it's really planning up front with them and being able to have things already prepared and ready to go.
Nice. Quick show of hands. Anybody on the planner side, or have you ever planned an event? Even at your home. Okay, great. We've got some planners in here. That's good because we're going back to Emma. Emma, what would you tell the planners in the room? Like, what are some things that will help them understand, like, how to set expectations? What are some resources? What advice would you give?
Sure. Yeah. So this is a question I actually get from our planners all the time. It's like, this information is overwhelming. There's so many things we could be doing to reduce waste. We're not really sure what questions to ask all of the time. And, I can't myself personally be in every single meeting that we have about these meetings and events. So last year, we decided to create a checklist of sort of the top 10 things that they should be asking their venues early on in the planning process. Some of those questions relate to waste, and it's the whole ecosystem, right? Food waste. Thinking about what outlets are available. Do you work with food rescue organizations? Do you compost on site? You know, like, again, that BEO planning process. Is there an option to embed our zero waste goals in that contracting process or in the actual BEOs? So I think that like just as a line item, as one of our recommendations for planners to ask the venue related to food was a huge one. And then that also incorporates the whole waste ecosystem. So just even asking a venue if they've ever run a zero waste event before and if they have the ability to do that. And a big piece of that for us is measurement. That's kind of come up as a theme as well. But knowing what you're actually producing from a waste perspective, I mean, it's essential for us to be able to measure how we're, comparing against our zero waste goals and strategy. But it's so insightful for planners to actually know, like, oh my gosh, yeah, bread rolls per person. You'd never think that it's 0.8. That's the magic number, right? So I think being able to have some access to data and having the venue work with you to do that. We also work with WM, formerly known as Waste Management. They work with us. Their advisory services team helps us sort of achieve these zero waste goals at our biggest events. And they usually bring a team on site to actually measure the waste for us. So helpful. And we always do a walkthrough with our planners or other important leaders so that they have a visual and they can understand, like random most common produced waste items. This is not food related, but this is just if you're planning a large event. Carpeting is very interesting as a waste source. So when these big expo areas are staged, especially if your venue has like certain colors that they use, those strips of carpet that are put in are wasted most often. So it's just like learning those things along the process have been so helpful, and we've just embedded those into our planning guidelines, which we sent to the U.S. Food Waste Pact, and I know that they're also embedded in that guidance. So totally check that out.
Can I just jump one quick thing? And I just wanted to mention, too, what we're finding, too, is the clients are now going to the planners. The corporate organizations are going to the planners, and they're saying, how do we incorporate sustainability into our event? So suddenly it's being driven by the client, and it could be driven by the mother of the bride. We rescued in Miami after some big wedding. So listen to what's going on out there as a planner, and certainly the client may want to incorporate food recovery as part of their model.
100%, absolutely. How many people in the audience have employees that are doing this work? Like maybe you're in food service, maybe you're in grocery, and there's so many opportunities. Caroline, what are you doing with your employees to help embed like this knowledge and info?
Yeah, so we know that food waste prevention, it has to be a key part of every step of the process. And so it's also really important that we involve employees in this as well throughout the process. And so when we're thinking of measuring event waste, it requires measuring it before and after the event so we can actually get a consumption rate. And so employees have to be bought in. They have to understand why are we taking photos? What does this mean? What are the environmental reasons, what are the financial reasons, and understand their role in the process. And so one best practice that we developed from another U.S. Food Waste Pact pilot that we participated in was the Shared Shelf Initiative. And so this was through the FoodWise pilot. We were able to give teams regular trainings on food waste, and then also give them practical tips that they can use in the kitchens at work, but then also bring at home to their kitchens. And then also we had an opportunity to do a employee contest for ideas of how to prevent food waste. And so this led to our Shared Shelf Initiative. It's a really simple solution, but really effective. And basically the teams would pool their unused ingredients to a designated space in the kitchen, and so they could cross-utilize those ingredients, cross stations, and really lead to some kind of really creative options for guests and really elevate the guest experience as well. And so now when we're working in events, we have to really, I think there's like 3 things that we really have been working on, and that's embedding measurement into our workflows. So not only the measurement piece, but then also making sure the sales team understands the data, the culinary teams understand the data, the operations team understand the data, because that's really what, at the end of the day, drives prevention. And then really making it relevant for teams so they understand the why. And then lastly, involving the teams in the design process. So we were able to mention the different prototypes with Lean Path, really involve the teams in creating this solution with Lean Path and using their feedback to create future iterations and really make sure that these employees are at the heart of the solution and really making sure we're incorporating their feedback. So yeah.
Nice. Good. Guys, we've got one more question, so get yours ready, okay? Liz, people in this room are trying to figure out, hey, maybe we're going to pilot something new. Right. You're piloting something. How do you make it repeatable? How do you make it sustainable, if you will?
Yeah.
What's your experience so far?
Yeah, I think I'm discovering maybe 3 essential ingredients, at least for us. I'll say up front, the reason for doing this Bumbershoot pilot, a 2-day music art festival, 25,000 attendees or so, was to see, could we have an impact in the first place? And we learned, yes, 700 pounds of donated food. Big deal, we decreased food waste by 98% based on a similar event that did not incorporate food rescue, and decreased garbage by 41%, because unfortunately food was going to garbage too. But the idea is not for Seattle Public Utilities to run every event and do all the coordination. The idea is find out what needs to be standardized and develop a playbook and hand it over to these large event planners so that they know what they need to do. And first part of that is really standardizing whatever can be standardized, the communication tools to the food vendors, the various types of equipment and signage on site, all of those sorts of flows and how you track the before, the after, the results. But the other piece is really building the relationships, because as I hinted earlier, these events, it's the same event planners from year to year. We found, to our delight, that there are 3 events happening at Seattle Center, and they involve the same food vendors. So if they're understanding the system, they need even less guidance every year. It's just part of doing the event. And then the other piece that softened my heart a lot, really being intentional about connecting the caterers and the food vendors with the hunger relief organizations and having the feedback go back to those food vendors and say, your brisket was appreciated by these families. And to the extent possible, getting those quotes so that those can be shared back, because that matters. That also, that the food vendors know that those hunger relief organizations are taking the same food safety precautions and providing the food the same respect and care that those producers took in producing their food and selling it to their customers. It needs to go all the way through to the end.
Absolutely. So we promised you guys questions. So we will get hands up if you have a question, and I think we have a mic out there, or maybe you need to take one of these. Absolutely. And we also, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm seeing a different screen, so I'm just make sure I'm in the right spot. Oh yeah, we'll stay here. Questions, would you mind? And we will have resources in a minute.
Hi, so I work with an organization that connects these donations to food rescue organizations. And often when we're in planning phases with large-scale events, they say, well, it could be a pallet, it could be 15 pallets, and no one knows. And so we want to make sure that it's also worthwhile for our organizations to show up. Is there a 0.8 roles that can help me figure out how many organizations I should activate for these sorts of events?
That is a challenge. Obviously, when you've done something for 5 years in a row, you have a sense of what you do. The first year when we did the Super Bowl, we had no idea. And it really just became, we worked with our receiving agencies and kind of had them on call just to say, okay, we're rescuing at the Super Bowl. We have no idea what we're going to be getting. And we would go there early and survey it all and then contact them. So, you know, it is a challenge because a lot of it is guesstimate.
As we go to the next question, I will say too, I'm taking some notes of these questions where we're moving into the next phase of the pilot that will start in June. So your questions that we don't have answers for, it helps highlight what we can do in the next pilot. So thank you for those.
Hi, I'm with Rust Belt Riders. We're a community composter in Cleveland, and I'm looking to bridge the gap between food rescue and organics recycling. And we work with a lot of the receiving agencies for our local food rescue efforts who receive, a lot of food from the efforts of Hunger Network is the person or the entity we work with that they ultimately can't use. And sometimes they're burdened by the costs associated with our work that they feel, is kind of misappropriated that they would have to then pay to recycle the food that they're getting. And I'm wondering if you have any strategies or relationships that serve as an example of how we can, kind of solve the full wasted food scale from both recovery to, recycling those parts of the food that don't end up being used.
Me again?
Yeah, I guess it was for Ellen specifically, but also Caroline, I'd love to know too if there's like strategies at Aramark to think about food recovery and composting in the kitchen, or if you like, see it as one full cycle, or if those things are distinguished in your work.
Yeah, so I mentioned the EPA's wasted food scale, and that's really our priority is if we have food that's safe and that can be eaten, we want it to go to our communities. There's some logistics behind that, especially with events. A lot of the food that's out on a buffet, fortunately that because of food safety cannot be donated. But anything that's held at the right temperatures in our kitchens is certainly eligible for donation. I think a couple challenges that come up is having the space. So we in some of our operations go through hundreds of events, and so being able to have the space in our cold storage to be able to hold the food until a donor is able to come. Those are some of the challenges that come up. But yeah, certainly it's high priority to first donate to communities, and then we do compost in a lot of our kitchens too. So yeah.
And just to add to that, I was just going to say most of the venues that we work with either do compost on their own or they have another way to divert food waste like buffets or certainly the scraps that end up in the garbage. So they usually handle that separately, either through a third-party organization, or I think Compass Group is now going to be working with Mill on a commercial way to turn those scraps into that soily pellet that they have. So I think that will be a future in terms of composting.
Hi, my name is Frederick. I work in grocery retail, but my question's about sort of vis-a-vis the next 10-year plan and conversation around maybe AI or just in general leveraging technology and thinking forward. How do we move, or what are you all thinking about when it comes to moving from capturing the waste and doing great things with it and hopefully feeding people with it to the prevention, the top of the scale? Like, how do we reduce that waste down so that we're just not even worried about it as much on the back end? And I'd love to hear like what the brightest and craziest ideas are.
I mean, I think it was mentioned, but there are some companies out there that are really focused on that and the intersection between sustainability, AI, data enhancement, like Lean Path, I know was brought up. But I think there's like two pieces, I guess, that we're thinking about. There's that visual audit piece that we sort of worked on with the U.S. Food Waste Pact at our event in Orlando, where people actually like seeing what was most commonly wasted. I almost think tells a bigger story than just implementing the data behind the scenes. So I think I wouldn't want to lose sight of doing those visual audits in addition to doing some enhanced data tracking to actually inform decision making, which it sounds like you guys are doing at Aramark as well. But I do think that's going to streamline processes a lot to be able to actually estimate attrition a little bit better without as much human error and all of those things. So I think we're going to get there, and to be able to also standardize and spread that across a bunch of different events instead of having to kind of treat each one as its own unique challenge and solution, but to have data over time that you can visualize and see like, okay, for this event, we had this many people and this is what we served. And to be able to have like a platform that can show that, I think would be so beneficial. And that's sort of where I see it going. But yeah, I think a big thing that we do keep talking about is not wanting to lose the visual piece, because that really changes hearts and minds when people are actually seeing pictures like you shared.
And I'll say too, what I'm seeing in grocery is a lot of predictive analytics that's happening that we've started on prevention side. That's where we should be working first, I think all of us, but that's evolving so fast. And a lot of it's on employee phones. You can walk up to the shelf because every shelf has a code. You know what product goes there, and you're able to move your phone around and say, oh, okay, I only need to restock 3 of these. Those are some of the tools that I'm seeing in grocery. So unfortunately, we're almost out of time, but we will have a little time in between before we go to the closing of this session. This is also going to be recorded, so in this 15 minutes before, come snag any of us. We also promised you, though, that you're going to leave with something. We think you've left with a lot of information of things that you can implement, but we want to highlight a couple things with the pilot once again, that you can see some reduction numbers of areas where we looked at specifically. So we would encourage folks to look at the guidelines for planners as well as for the venues, because we found great cost savings in that. I'm just going to share a couple really quick, but on this planner one, you can see that I've got it bolded, and on the left is the planner guidelines, and then in the middle is the action that we took, and then the impact, and you can kind of see that below where we discover, design, deliver, and debrief about this. But being able to save $465 at one event just from adjusting, that's big, that's an impact, and that's just a simple conversation, folks. We're not even talking about pictures and AI at this point. We're just talking about humans talking to humans. That's smart. So for venues, and now we're looking at the design, order, and also the prep phase of this, one that I just want to share that blows my mind, number one, like the buffet production going from 3.5 pounds to 2 pounds, that's amazing. That's amazing progress. Like, we don't want to discount a 43% reduction. I would like to encourage everyone to not even have 2 pounds of food per person at a meal. Let's look about 1.2 pounds per meal for a lunch and dinner, in that range. But that's amazing. And they know that, and they did that because of how they're looking at their confirmation and how they're not overproducing, so going back to prevention. On the end of this, looking at how we're thinking about serving, eating, and debriefing and having the conversation, simple. I'm not even going to talk about this. You've already talked about this. Don't put 2 things in salad dressing. You don't need it. Caroline talked about FoodWise. FoodWise employee engagement, actions all up in there, y'all. So you've got a low-waste event, you've got FoodWise for your employees, you've got a video of the Super Bowl that Ellen did that was playing when we came in. You have resources, all right? That's what we want to make sure that you know, and I have no clue what time it is now, and we have 1 minute left, and Nia wanted to make an announcement.
Our Oscar. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, guys. Here's the plan, because we're the fun panel, right? This is the last one, like we said at the beginning. Woo! Before we leave this room, we just want to do one more thing. I do want to say there's one final main stage session. I do think there's going to be perhaps an announcement about next year's summit location at that, I've been told. So make sure you get up there to learn more. But before we leave, we would like to be the cool group and try and take a selfie with everybody. Yes, the Oscar selfie. If you are on the ends and it's possible to make your way to the middle aisle, please do so. If not, don't worry about it, but I'm gonna get on the stage and try and do this, and I appreciate your participation. Wow, look at that. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you all so much for a great week and a great panel, guys. Give it up for your panelists.